Let me tell you a story about a man that you probably have never heard of. His name is Reverend Frank Wilton Smith. Here's a picture that I found of Frank. We looked high and low to find him. This dates back, we think, to the 1950s. Frank was born in 1927, lived through the Great Depression and World War II, passed away in 2007 at 80 years of age. Frank came to Christ as a 14-year-old boy, July 4th. Radically saved and transformed, devoured the Bible. Could not afford to go to Bible school, so without any formal training, launched into the ministry, began preaching the gospel in a little tiny town in North Mississippi. One of the little churches in town heard about Frank, who is now 19 years old, and offered for him to become the senior pastor. And Reverend Frank Smith, at the tender age of 19, almost 20, became the pastor of this little church, First Assembly of God. The church is still there to this day. On a good Sunday, he had 60 people in church. He'd pack it out Sunday mornings and Wednesday nights and for revivals, and touched a lot of families, dozens of families. Some estimate hundreds of people came to Christ in Frank's ministry in that little church. Almost every family in the church was still living the effects of the Great Depression and living in poverty, biting, the kind of poverty that hurts to live in. And Frank cared and ministered to and discipled every family. One family in particular caught Frank's attention. The dad was fresh out of prison. The mom trying to hold things together. They had one child and she lost another child during childbirth. Her heart was broken and holding on for dear life. And Frank had great compassion on this family. Took them under his wing, fed them, loved them, treated them like brothers and sisters. On Wednesday night, he would meet early with the family and he would teach the boys to play the guitar. And their son was interested in it. So Frank would sit with him long after church was over and teach him the chords on the guitar. Taught him how to sing. For 3 years, he poured his life into this family until finally they had to move away to find work. When Frank died in 2007, no one noticed except for his family and friends. They buried him in a little cemetery in Tupelo. You can still find his grave today. There's no monument. There's no statue. No books written. He's not famous at all. In fact, nobody even noticed when Frank Wilton Smith died. But you may have heard about that teenage boy that he taught to play the guitar and how to sing. You may have heard the news when he died. August 16th of 1977, if you were alive, is the day that this man died. Elvis Presley. He was the 12-year-old kid that was discipled by Frank Wilton Smith. He sat at that pastor's knee and learned how to play the guitar and how to sing. Elvis would tell stories. If you've read his biography, you know this. If you watched the recent movie of his life, Elvis never touched alcohol or illegal drugs his entire life because of the influence of his pastor. Ironically, he did die from the abuse of prescription drugs, which led to heart failure. But he told countless friends, not going to touch. Many testify that Elvis came back to Christ before he died. I had a chance meeting with a guy in Gatlinburg a few years ago that was part of the Memphis Mafia. Many of his friends say that Elvis came back to Christ while he would close every concert with a gospel song, his favorite, How Great Thou Art. We don't know the condition of Elvis's soul. We're not his judge. But I do know that the grace of God is great. And that if a sinner repents, the Father will forgive him. But it got me to reconsidering who the rock star was that came out of Tupelo, Mississippi, out of that little white frame church. Was it the king of rock and roll? Or was it this pastor, Frank Smith, who would go on to pastor 16 churches across the state of Mississippi, who would love the same woman for 60 plus years, would raise 4 children and a passel of grandchildren and now great-grandchildren, who left a legacy of a man who loved Jesus and loved his wife and loved his children and spent his entire life on a single purpose. You can chase after the world if you want. Elvis sold 1 billion records. His empire, he was a billionaire in his 30s. He had everything the world had to offer. Filled up coliseums. Could marry any woman that he chose. Could live in any house that he wanted. But did not make it out of his 40s. You can chase the world and taste the world and get what the world has to offer. Or you can devote your life to a purpose higher than yourself. Like this man. He lived a simple life. He's buried in a simple grave. But I can't imagine the crown that waits for him on the other side. Let me close the message like I started it. I want to challenge you to focus on your purpose. A purpose greater than yourself. And over the next 4 weeks, I want you to answer this question. What is your vision for life?